Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conscious Business Connections, brought to you by the New York City chapter of Conscious Capitalism. My name is Bob Caporale, and I'm joined today by Matt Harris of Bloom Credit. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. So, Matt, as you know, conscious capitalism is a philosophy. It's dedicated to the fact that businesses can make money, but they should do so in a conscious way. And the philosophy talks about four different tenets, ranging from stakeholders to conscious leadership to conscious culture to also having a higher purpose for your business. And so the purpose of this show is to highlight companies who are practicing some of these principles so that they can share with their audience some of these things and that other people can learn from it and maybe apply it in their own businesses as well. So why don't we go ahead and start by telling us a little bit about Bloom Credit? What's the company all about? What do you guys do?
Sure. So Bloom is a API for accessing and analyzing credit bureau data. And so what that basically means is that you have the three credit bureaus, of which most people have heard of one, if not all three of them, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And what these companies do is they track the payments you make to banks for any loans or credit cards you have. And then other banks and lenders can access that data as a means of being able to figure out if you're creditworthy for any type of credit transaction, whether that be, a mortgage or an auto loan or another credit card or whatever that may be. But that data can be really difficult to access sometimes. So what we do is we provide a nice digital wrapper that makes it easy for any company, regardless of whether or not you're a big bank or an up-and-coming startup, with some seed funding to actually get up and running with a credit bureau product. So that's basically what we do. We do everything from helping companies provide credit reports for loan applications to helping companies launch the next Credit Karma with credit monitoring solutions to being able to make those reports of on-time payments back to the bureau so they can continue to keep your data clean and help you get access to the loans you need. So that's what Bloom does.
A lot of stuff there to unwind, right? So when you talk about, the credit report, let's start with this because I'm not very familiar with this world, right? But what kinds of companies would absolutely need to get access to that? Like, what is the purpose of that? I know if I go and get a loan, I think they have to access my information through credit. But are there other applications other than those obvious ones that smaller companies might need access to?
Yeah, totally. So I think there's like a couple of examples. So like if you look at a lot of what the up and coming like FinTech market is addressing, it's normally addressing people who are very underbanked. So let's say that one of these FinTech companies that's addressing someone who's underbanked wants to be able to lend to you in the future. They might decide that they need to give you something called a credit builder loan. And what that is basically, it's a loan to yourself where you can make on-time payments that are reported back to the bureaus that are put into a savings account. So what does that basically mean is you are moving money from your checking account to your savings account on a cadence that a bank requests so that it can be reported as though you're paying a loan on time. What Bloom basically does in that capacity is not only do we provide the credit data to both get access to those loans and monitor them, but we also report those payments on time. So let's say that you're 23 and you're getting your first bank account with Acorns and you've never taken out a credit card before. You may basically go through an experience that is powered by Bloom in order to get access to whatever that credit card may be.
Very cool, man. I mean, like it's a world that again I'm not familiar with. I have to ask. It probably has nothing to do with conscious capitalism. But how did you get into this? This seems like such a a path that's like not very common to come out of college with, right?
Totally. So I mean this actually does relate a lot to conscious capitalism.
Oh, does it? Good. That's why I asked.
Great. Glad we could be aligned on that. Yeah, I mean, so basically the way that this happened, it was a really roundabout way of getting into that particular product. But what kind of got me started on the journey was in recognizing that, I worked at an online lender that worked in student loans, and what I saw was happening kind of on the ground is that, most lenders are declining something like 10 to 15 times the number of people who actually apply for their loans. So think about how crazy that is if you're working at a lender. There are 15 people who walk into your store, so to speak, to buy a product, and only one walks out with one.
Wow.
And the way that we do that as an industry is not the most consumer friendly. The analogy I always like to draw for this is like, imagine you walked into the Gap and they told you how crappy you looked in jeans and to come back next year.
Which could very well happen to me, but they thankfully don't do that, right?
Right, exactly. Right. So, and if they did, you would never go back into that store.
Absolutely, of course.
And the financial equivalent of this is we decline you for loans. And if you were to call up a bank and be like, why did you decline me? Their response is normally something to the effect of like, good luck.
Hmm.
And consumers, rightfully so, get very upset with that
Yeah.
messaging. And so when I was working at that lender, it just didn't make sense to me that we weren't capable of helping these consumers. And so I went around to a bunch of companies to kind of help us partner with them, like the existing credit monitoring companies, and they didn't really know how to help those consumers that didn't have good credit scores. And so it kind of just became really apparent to me. It's like the company I worked at the time probably would have been able to help the consumers had they had a easier access to actually go launch that type of product and really understand it. So we originally started with something else, but through a roundabout way of pivoting, we actually realized the problem in this is that in a lot of ways, like credit data in and of itself, kind of as we've touched on, it's like it's not a very well-known subject. It's a highly technical subject. The
Right.
analogy I always create for it is like credit in a lot of ways is like 1 + 1 - 7 = 23, and why? Because it always has been.
Right.
It's like I couldn't explain to you why we decided it was this way, but we did, so
That's
we're
what it
doing it.
is, right?
Like what we're effectively doing is trying to remove the barriers of entry both to accessing that data and then transforming it in ways that can actually be empowering. An example would be something to the effect of just how can you improve your credit score.
See, this is amazing because, and I could completely relate to this. I mean, you do, you go and you apply for something. And I guess the opposite applies as well. If you get accepted for the loan, like, why? It would
Right,
be nice to know why I got accepted and what kinds of things I need to do to keep that up, right?
right,
Because it is this kind of ambiguous, thing. Like, how is a credit score even calculated? And
right.
in my day-to-day life, what moves am I making that may or may not affect my credit score? So these are really, really important elements. So when you talk about your mission, or part of your mission being that now you're providing this service to companies who would help consumers with that, right? You're not the ones that are actually doing it. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we attempted to do this ourselves at one point. Is the roundabout way of putting it. So we developed a bunch of tools and services to help consumers develop their credit. And what we found is there are a lot of companies in market who are already very good at working with consumers.
Mhm.
So competing with them is actually less powerful than just giving them the tools.
Got it. Got it. So that's important. So now with that said, because it seems like you're very passionate about this, does this lead to having to be selective about who you'll work with or not? Or is that not part of the equation here?
Generally, it is. And so, what we have the advantage of in this particular capacity is that we often have the deep credit expertise and knowledge that our clients do not.
Mm.
So, there's two ways that this works. One, if someone comes to us with a use case that we don't approve of, we just don't approve it. And we'll be
Right.
like, hey, we won't do this. And so, we've had that come up in the past where a client has come to us being like, hey, we want to charge for this service. And we're just like, hey, you can charge for services, but like we're not going to allow you to charge like $1 per score bump. It's like
Right. It's not
that
somebody
could
you're
be
choosing to do business with. Yeah.
correct, and that can be seen as, and there's like a bunch of reasons why that may not work, both from a compliance perspective and from just how comfortable do we feel with that as a company. But what we do often have the advantage doing is going back to the company being like, we may not do this, but if you were open to A, B, and C, that we might be willing to do one of these use cases over here, and that we've actually gone through that process before, where a lot of the times, like I think oftentimes financial services gets a bad rap, and it's like most of the time people actually mean well. And so what we've actually just been able to do is by like kind of unpacking a lot of the stuff that's behind going into those particular score bumps and like what it takes and like how to work with that data, that we can sometimes even go back with some of those clients and end up working with them later as long as they end up coming back. So I think a lot of like we see, and maybe like what is cool about this is like we do feel as though we have some power in this scenario to guide people towards choices that are empowering to the consumer, but we ultimately reserve the right to not work with companies that we don't think are going to do that effectively. So
Yeah, makes sense. And so this idea of you have a kind of a higher purpose for your business, and you can help to empower your customers to enable that higher purpose is really important, and I think an important part of conscious capitalism as well. Um,
totally. And I think just to touch on that a little bit further, if I can jump in, it's like
yeah, please.
the thing that I really play off of that is like, what is my personal purpose and how do I use the company as a vehicle for that?
Mm,
So if I really were to like unpack like what do I think my purpose is, it's um I really kind of view myself in that like teacher healer mindset of like, for me, I want to enable whatever the blocks are for someone to get over is maybe the wrong word, but really enable the path for people to live what is their best and most potential filled lives, no matter what context that is. And in this instance, I'm just capable of taking what knowledge I have in the financial aspects of how to actually manage and work with credit to enable that for that one particular aspect. So that, if you were to tie that into like a full sentence, it's Fluent provides the tools necessary for people to live their fullest lives, and credit should never be a barrier to that.
Yeah, and what I really think that's interesting about this too, and I love that purpose, is that in fintech, in the financial services world, I don't think a lot of people associate that with conscious type businesses, right? Although there are, I'm sure, many. But here's an example of, in this world of fintech, how look, financial is part of capitalism. This is part of what makes the world go around. And if you can make this more empowering to consumers, to customers, to the whole supply chain, that's really an important part of this, which I think is great. So you talk about your personal mission. Certainly inside your own business, how you run your business, that there's, I'm sure, conscious things that you're doing there as well. Any examples that you can think of in that aspect?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think one of the most interesting and maybe like, I'd say possibly intense for like newcomers is the way that we do our like weekly management check-ins.
Okay.
They look a lot more like almost like what you would think of an everyman circle to look like than they do like your typical business meeting. And so the way that we do them is like, it's a really simple structure of, we start with just a business round of like, is there anything tactical we need to cover here?
Yeah.
And then we try to get that out of the way as soon as possible. The next phase of that is just, you're actually doing a check-in on like, how do I feel right now?
Oh,
Like,
interesting. Yeah.
I feel green, and I associate that with excitement. And so it's like, cool, we've now gotten into that. And then we'll actually go into like a 5-minute process. I'm like, can you walk through that a little bit further? And you're like, I feel really excited because we got A, B, and C done. And here's what's really great about that. Or sometimes it goes the other way around and you're like, hey, I feel red and I'm discouraged. And it's like, we haven't been able to settle this prospect for a while, and that's really difficult. And what we found is that actually by like almost taking like that more emotional viewpoint actually gets to the heart of the problems in the business a lot more effectively than if you just try and be really like regimented, like let's do our numbers review and so on and so forth. It's like those things have their place and they're necessary, but for us, it's just we found that it's been a lot more effective to really try to get to the heart of the matter. And sometimes we do have those business check-ins where they end up taking 35 or 40 minutes because there's just like a really important tactical thing that needs to get done. But we always come back to the like, how are you feeling in this moment?
That is
And so I think
so
that's
cool. So amazing. And I have to tell you, like, that's one of those nuggets that I love for this show, right? Is that people could take that and use that in their business or some form of it. I mean, I spent 20 years in the corporate world and I ran a lot of meetings, I can tell you. And I never once did that. And I can tell you what the net effect was, that anybody who was reporting out always, I'm sure, felt like it was for the company's benefit, right? Everything that they were doing was about the company, the company, the company. Well, why don't I just ask how you're feeling? How does this affect you? It's a very simple turn of words, right? But it's so important. And I think it would change the dynamic of everything. Really incredible.
and because the irony is like you are doing it for the company's benefit, but the company is actually just people, and the people are sitting in that room.
Exactly. I mean, this is a perfect example of conscious capitalism, right? It's about the entire stakeholder chain and treating your employees with the respect that they deserve, because they're the ones that are making the company go around, which is really just amazing. How did you think of that, by the way? Is that, I mean, it's such a clever idea just to relate your emotion with a color or something like that. How did that come up?
I've done like other types of check-ins like that where people will go like green, yellow, red, and basically I was combining a bunch of different places where I practice. Part of it was like that green, yellow, red. I've heard people do that before. Part of it was just like effectively doing body scans, and then also like the structure of business round going into like a round 1 check-in of just like, here's how I feel, versus a round 2 check-in versus then a checkout.
Yeah.
Is just a like slightly abbreviated process of what I stole from a men's group that I'm a part of. So
oh, that's right. Yeah. This is exactly what this is all about. So many people will steal it from you, so I'm sure it'll be fun.
I hope they do. I mean, yeah, like I think I'll quote Steve Jobs for probably the first time in my life, and I don't even think this is his quote. So now this is just embarrassing. But good artists copy and great artists steal. It's like yeah, like all I'm doing is just taking other work that other people have brought me through, and then just trying to find, because like the thing is like, look, I don't think it would be appropriate to do full-on healing journeys as our like monthly or our weekly management sync. But a version of that is certainly helpful, because if we can get to the emotions of what's happening, it's normally the crux of what people need to actually feel good and complete in their role. So that's like one example. We do a lot of coaching. So like all of the executive team have coaches that are paid for We do a lot of different offsite work where we provide resources around like, meditation. And uh, I've had a plan that has been kind of off put by the pandemic, but one thing that like we will be implementing in Bloom is almost something similar to what you'd see happen in like a landmark or a momentum education or like a gratitude training or something like that, where you can actually institute this concept of levels into people working within the company. And so like level one is like we teach you like a basic version of a skill that's going to impact you throughout your life.
Yeah.
And so that could be something like breath work. It's like, we'll literally hire a breath coach for you for a month to teach you breathwork modalities so that you can handle that on a day-to-day basis. Or like, we'll pay for the intro to TM session. It's like, cool, like you can learn transcendental meditation, which for most people that learn it is the meditation that they really stick with over time because it's so easy to do. And so like we can actually give you skills that will impact your life, and then we can layer on them as you stay within the company for multiple years, right? Maybe we can send you to an advanced meditation retreat rather than just a basic one. Maybe we can put you through an entire course of like a landmark or a momentum or something like that. Places outside of the business that allow you to feel empowered within the business, because the truth is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So if we can help you feel more empowered outside of the business within your everyday life, you're probably going to bring that into Bloom, and we're probably going to see the benefit of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's like another major part of just like where we kind of see how we do things a little bit differently is that I take the idea that someone comes to work at the company very seriously. Like if you're going to commit 2 to 3 years of your life to make something that like ultimately is like, it benefits everyone at Bloom, but like I would just be dishonest to say it disproportionately benefits me as the founder and the CEO. Like I am the person who benefits most from this person's hard work. So I have a responsibility to each person that joins that I also disproportionately invest in you more than other companies, because I understand that even though you may not benefit to the same level of me financially as a result of this, I want to be sure that you got everything you could out of this experience.
So amazing. It's absolutely in line with everything that this organization stands for sure. But I think you said something that I don't even know that I think it's so ingrained in your DNA that you probably didn't even realize that you said it. But you're talking about, if you're going to come and work here for 2 to 3 years, I imagine that many companies who are going to invest that amount of time in training and so forth, especially training that's not necessarily on the job type training, would say, well, now I expect that you owe me, 10 years of your life, 20 years of your life. But that's not even, it doesn't seem like that's even in your mindset. It's about, look, however long we're going to be together, we want this journey to be positive for both of us. And that's just an amazing, amazing thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe for me, it's just, maybe you're right. It's just like, it wouldn't occur to me to think of that way, but it's like, I think there are instances where we've done trainings like that before. In fact, I would actually even say we're more likely to be like, hey, maybe we need some more time from you to do like it on the job type of training. Like if we were gonna like pay like 10 grand for someone to do like product training, we might be like, hey, we need a little bit more time, or we need to know we're gonna get X amount of time from you. For stuff like that, to me, it's not even a question of whether or not we would.
Yeah.
And a big part of the reason being is like, one, I don't think it works to necessarily hold people to that. But I think the other side of that is like ultimately working at Bloom is a choice. The second it stops being a choice, it's actually no longer effective for either side. And so we've also done the opposite of that, where people I've realized someone who's at the company is like not actually there anymore. Like they're there, but they're not there. And you're like, hey, let's actually like make it worth your while to leave. And what that is not like, hey, get out. It's actually like, I actually want to compensate you super fairly for not staying any longer, so you have the time and space to go find a job and you get something from it. So
because you're clearly not fulfilled, right? So we want you to be fulfilled.
Right. And so like we've done stuff where it's like someone hasn't fully vested all their stock and we'll grant it to them anyway. Let's be like, hey, you should have some of this. You did a lot of good work here. You don't want to be here anymore, but this is, you deserve the upside in what this is. Because going back to that original thing, it's like, I'm painfully aware of the fact that the like stock relationship for most employees that come to Bloom is not necessarily fair given a lot of the work they are doing, unless we become a multi-billion-dollar company. And to be honest, I obviously think that we can. And
I think if you keep going like this, you can.
Right. And maybe that's just because we do a lot of work on alignment with our team, but it's like, yeah, like the best team members are going to be the ones who are constantly aligned. And it's something I've said multiple times. It's just for people who are no longer interested in being at the company, that's not something to be like ashamed of or hide. Like actually talk to me about it and we'll make it a win-win scenario. Because the only thing that's not workable is when you hide it from me. That's when things start to get difficult. And so we really try and put it all on the table. So like, I don't want to, I think part of my reason of just like also calling out, it's like, I'm not perfect. We've definitely done things like that before because it feels like conventional wisdom, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, like someone says that I should do that. And what I've noticed is that like when we've done it, it doesn't necessarily work to be like, hey, I'm going to impose stuff on you. What we think works is really like, can we get in full alignment about you wanting to be here for the right reasons?
It's so amazing. And I'll tell you, there's just so many things again to unpack there, but what's so cool about everything that you're saying is it's coming straight from the heart. And I not on this show, thankfully, but I've talked to a lot of companies, right, that they're saying the right words, and that that's what they want to feel, but it's not necessarily what you could tell that they're actually doing or living. But I think it's very natural. It seems to be very natural for you, which I
Totally.
think is an incredible thing. And it's not this kind of blind loyalty. You have to have blind loyalty to the company, otherwise, whatever, right? It's very mutual, and I think that's a big part again of conscious capitalism, paying attention to all the
Yeah.
stakeholders.
And I think one of the reasons that comes up a lot of the time is that like if you just break down our survival mechanisms into four core categories, they're often look good, be right, be in control, and avoid pain. And a
Mm.
lot of the subjects we're talking about actually are things that would trigger these types of subjects, which is like someone's going to leave my company. Fear, anxiety, we are going to lose a good worker. So now I'm going to look good about it and I'm going to try and control it.
You got it,
And
man.
it's and so it's like, yeah, like you bring that up and like I'll say the right words, but that's actually what I'm coming from is look
Right,
good, be in control.
right.
And what I'm actually just choosing in this moment to do is realize that the having integrity about what I actually mean will go a lot further than the right thing to say.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, what is like often missed is that the truth is far more powerful than the best way that this could look.
Yeah.
And I don't know when I learned that lesson or how I learned that lesson, but at some point it just became a lot more natural for me to say. And sometimes like even in this conversation, I've had moments of like subconsciousness of like, did I go too far in just stating this thing that I just stated? Was that too much?
Yeah.
Is this too intense? Like that stuff's normal, but it's also just like sitting with those voices, realizing that like the ones that are coming from scarcity are not here to help me. And the truth is that like if I just state what I actually really mean and we are values aligned, then that's going to be the best possible outcome rather than telling someone one thing and meaning another. So
That's it. That is absolutely it, and that's the transparency that I think so many people are looking for. Well, I can tell you, I mean, sounds to me like you're on your way to being $1 billion company. But if you're not, for whatever reason, I think you have a great career in business coaching because, boy, do we need more people like you and these
appreciate that.
kinds of outlooks. So really, really appreciate it. Well, I know there's going to be a lot of people who want to go find out more about Bloom Credit after we show them this video. So where can people find out more about your company, what you do, and so forth?
Sure. I mean, we're still surprisingly not that public. So you can go to our website, www.bloomcredit.io,
Mhm.
and you'll find some information about us there. Um, we're on LinkedIn. We don't have a ton of a Twitter presence, but that's kind of like the idea. More to come on us in the future is probably the best way of putting it.
Awesome. I'm sure people will be looking out for it. Matt, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, really and truly. I think you have a lot of great things to offer. You gave some great examples and some things that I think people could take away right away and use in their job. So I couldn't think of a more fulfilling interview. So really, thank you so much for being with us. It's been just an absolute pleasure.
This is great. This is a lot of fun. Thanks
Awesome.
for having
Great.
me.
You bet. And we don't want to leave also without thanking the sponsors of our New York City chapter, and that is the Core Club and the Tomiak Foundation. Without their generous support, programs like this would not be possible. So we thank them. And of course, we also thank you. So if you liked this video, if you like what you heard, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Tell your friends, subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have you as a regular member of our community. You could also go to our website, which would be consciouscapitalism.nyc, and find out more about the events that we do and so forth. We'd love to have you again at our events and as part of our community. And until then, we thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you back on another episode of Conscious Business Connections. Thanks again.